Now, sticking with market moves, several Fed presidents are facing scrutiny after disclosing a number of large investments in stock trades over the past year. Steve Leisman is here with those details and the fallout. Steve?
Kelly, thanks. Amid an outcry about Fed officials owning and trading individual securities, an in-depth look by CNBC at Fed officials' own financial disclosures finds 3 who last year held assets of the same type the Fed itself was buying. Boston Fed President Eric Rosengren held several $100,000 worth of real estate investment trusts that owned mortgage-backed securities. He made 37 separate trades during 2020. The Fed last year purchased almost $700 billion in MBS. Rosengren announced last week he would sell these positions and stop trading while president. Dallas Fed President Robert Kaplan, he actively traded millions of dollars of individual stocks. He said he would take the same action as Rosengren. A spokesperson for Rosengren telling CNBC that he, quote, made sure his personal savings and investment transactions complied with what was permissible under Fed ethics rules. Fed Chair Jay Powell held between $1.25 and $2.5 million of muni bonds. The bonds were purchased no later than 2019 and are just a small part of his overall portfolio. They were held, however, while the Fed last year bought $21 billion in munis. A Fed spokesperson telling CNBC that Powell had no say over the Fed's individual bond purchases and no say over the investments in his family's trust. A Fed ethics officer determined that these holdings did not violate Fed ethics rules. Richmond Fed President Thomas Barkin, he held 1.3 to 3 million in individual corporate bonds purchased prior to 2020. He held these bonds while the Fed last year bought $46.5 billion of corporate bonds. Barkin declined to comment. He had no say, however, over individual bond purchases by the Fed. These holdings or trades do not appear to be barred by Fed ethics rules, but they raise the question: should those rules have banned officials from holding or trading the same assets the Fed bought after it widened those types of assets it would purchase in response to the pandemic? The Fed's own code of conduct says officials should be, quote, careful to avoid any dealings or other conduct that might convey even an appearance of conflict between their personal interests, the interests of the system, and the public interest. Kelly?
Which is a pretty broad statement. So were the actions against the rules or not?
They don't appear to be against the rules, or at least the letter of the law. But Dennis Kelleher, CEO of the nonprofit Better Markets, tells CNBC that if such Fed actions are not against the rules, well, the rules ought to change. Quote, to think that such trading is acceptable because it's supposedly allowed by the Fed's current policies only highlights that the Fed policies are woefully deficient. And as you know, Kelly, in response to CNBC questions, a Fed spokesperson released a statement yesterday saying Fed Chair Jay Powell ordered a review last week of the Fed's rules surrounding, quote, permissible financial holdings by senior Fed officials.
I have about 19 questions, Steve, so I'll rattle off a few of them to kind of get at this direction. Number one, has this always been the case that Fed officials held a lot of securities while they were while they were in their positions? Number two, were most of these positions or all of them taken before these people became Fed officials? It sounds like they obviously were not, although a lot of them may have been made before the pandemic. But still, number three, is there any limit to how much trading they can do, or the kinds of, is there 30-day rules or something like that? And number four, I guess the most broad observation here is, based on their own code of conduct statement, anything that would give the appearance of a conflict of interest, this would certainly fall into that category. How could it not?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let you make that judgment and others as well as to number four. As to number three, I believe, I'm not sure. I think the issue here, the broader issue, Kelly, I'll just try to take all three with this one comment, which is that the Fed dramatically changed the assets that it purchased last year. What happened is that they didn't change their ethics rules to account for this. It seems more like one of omission rather than commission. In the case of Powell and Barkin, they both previously owned those shares, did not buy any additional during the year. In the case of Rosengren, he bought it all through the year, and his ethics officer, I guess, signed off on all this. You can see that there is a blacked out signature on his disclosure form, so he did not believe he was breaking at least the letter of the ethics rules. Subsequently, however, well, what do they think? Well, Kaplan and Rosengren both said, hey, we shouldn't be doing this, so perhaps they're now acknowledging they shouldn't have done it to begin with.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.